approximately 10 p.m., Oxnard officers attempted a traffic stop on a vehicle with multiple suspects inside. The vehicle failed to yield, and upon initial contact with the officers, the suspects were non-compliant. As this situation was developing, a radio call was received of a brandishing of a firearm within a few blocks of our traffic stop. It was believed that the suspects in the vehicle had been involved in the brandishing. The suspects in the vehicle refused to follow the officers' orders. Additional officers were dispatched to assist, and at some point, the vehicle fled again from our officers. The vehicle finally stopped, at which time two suspects fled from the vehicle fled from the vehicle and the officers. The officers were fired upon while in foot pursuit of this vehicle. Multiple officers returned fire. As the scene was secured, we determined that three subjects were struck by gunfire. Two of those subjects sustained fatal gunshot wounds. The third sustained non-life-threatening life injuries. Unfortunately, one of the subjects who sustained fatal gunshot wounds was Mr. Alfonso Limon of Oxnard. The violent behavior of these suspects in this incident created and resulted in a tragedy and a tragic death of Mr. Limon. The suspects, keep in mind, were in control of the situation, and our officers were responding to those threats and the actual incident of them killing and shooting and trying to shoot and kill Oxnard officers. I and my agency in the city of Oxnard condemn our heartfelt condolences to the Limon family because they're going through this incident, and it's something that no family should have to go through. It's also important to note that our officers have been impacted by this incident as well, and as they have their administrative time, which is basic practice for us, we extend our heartfelt concerns for those officers and their families. Remember that our community has been impacted as well by this incident and this tragic event, and I will be willing to entertain any questions at this time if you all have questions.
Chief, is there any way to determine who shot who as far as who was struck, Mr. Limon?
That's a good question. It will be determined, I'm certain, at the conclusion of the investigation. I think it's important to note, too, that I can't discuss the details of the investigation. We have asked the Ventura County Sheriff's Office to come in and investigate this matter due to the extenuating circumstances of this incident as well as the resources that they have. We feel that they'll handle a thorough investigation.
Do you know if Mr. Limon did anything to make the officers feel he might be one of the suspects?
That is a question that I think should be answered through the investigation. What I'm here to say today is Mr. Limon was not a component or was not in that vehicle at the time of the incident, and he was not involved in the incident.
Were any suspect weapons recovered from the scene?
I'm sorry?
Were any suspect weapons recovered from the scene?
That's a question I'd rather leave to the ongoing administrative investigation. I think it's safe to say that we did recover weapons.
How many officers were involved with the firing?
We are actually going to say multiple suspects or multiple officers were involved in this incident. Please, let me finish. Please remember that it's only been 72 hours since this incident began. We are still combing through, rolling through all of the information in the investigation, and one of the things I don't want to do today in the spirit of being honest and integrable is I don't want to taint the investigation. So I think my response to that question is that we had multiple officers involved in this incident.
How many officers were on site if more were called in to assist in the pursuit?
Again, there were multiple officers at that scene, so I would prefer not to answer the number of officers who were out there. I think it is safe to say that we had to call in additional resources during this incident to help us handle calls for service, as most of our officers at that time were involved in the incident.
And the status of those officers right now?
And the status is they're on administrative leave, which is standard practice for an incident like this in a law enforcement agency.
How many officers?
Again, there were multiple officers involved in this incident.
Are you naming the suspect who was hospitalized with the non-life-threatening injuries?
I'm sorry?
Are you naming the suspect who was hospitalized with the non-life-threatening injuries?
We are not going to name the suspect involved. That will be the responsibility of the Ventura County Sheriff's Office to name that when they are appropriately and when they deem it necessary.
Is that person?
I'm sorry?
Has he been arrested?
That's a question I would leave to the investigating agency to answer.
Can you tell me about the surveillance camera? Because it appears that you have plenty of surveillance camera video, or the Sheriff's Department does.
That's a component of the investigation, and they will be handling that information as well.
What about a 911 call? You were saying dispatch alerted officers that they believe the suspects were indeed armed?
That was a call that received of a brandishing of a weapon that happened a couple of blocks away. As they were involved in the numerous traffic stops, they received that information.
I know this is still under investigation, but there are some people in the neighborhood who are angry because they said he had his hands up and he was saying, "Don't shoot." Can you respond to that at all, if that was happening?
That will be a component of the investigation as well. Again, it's an ongoing investigation, and I cannot respond to that. To answer the question or to discuss the issue about the community being angry, I can understand that. When any type of tragedy happens in the community, especially one that was unintended in this regard, I think it's important for us all to understand that everyone deals with tragedy differently. There are certain cycles, certain emotions that people will go through. Our employees are going through this as well, but never want to discount the fact that the Limon family is having to deal with something that, to be honest with you, as a mother, I could only imagine what his mom is going through.